we want to give you a timeline so you can kind of get an idea of what to do 2 weeks before, 1 week, and the night of the event, all right? First of all, 2 weeks out, make sure that you've got some kind of an announcement, a general announcement announcing a storm is coming. Make sure it's exciting, all right?
That's right. Maybe do a skit or something. Get those teenagers in your group involved, because the more you can help them get excited about the event, the better it's going to be.
Absolutely.
Another thing we want you to do is to build a top 10 list. These are your teenagers' friends that they say, look, these are the top 10 people that I'm praying for to come to the event so that they can hear about the gospel of Jesus Christ. A couple of things to do with that top 10 list. Take those names, put them on a larger prayer list. Hand that list back out to the teenagers, to the rest of your leaders, maybe to some of the key people in your church that are going to be
pastor,
helping out with the event. Exactly, because you want to make sure that everybody is behind this event, really just praying about it and praying for each of those teenagers.
Absolutely.
Another thing to do is maybe take each of those names and put them on cards and hand those cards out to people so that they can be specifically praying for these teenagers that are going to be coming.
Maybe the senior saints in your church, some of the folks who really care about your ministry and want to lift that event up in prayer.
Exactly. Another thing we want to have you do is try to get those addresses or the addresses of those teenagers on your top 10 list, because those are the teenagers that you're going to go around and pick up that night. And if you can get those addresses to your driver coordinator, he can make sure that every person has a map of where they're going to pick up those teenagers.
If they can't get the address, make sure they at least get the general location where it is. They can kind of plot it all out and get a good idea. Now, one key thing you want to make sure here is make sure that you let your students know, do not invite your friends ahead of time.
That's right.
All right?
That's right.
Do not invite, and you're asking me right now, wait a minute. You're asking me to do an event, but I'm not going to invite my friends
That doesn't
ahead of
really
time?
make sense to me, Aaron.
All right, well, here's the deal. Guys, the key to the storm event is to catch them by surprise. That's it. Catch them by surprise.
And if we tell all of our friends about this before the event, it kind of downplays that whole surprise thing. When you go to the door and you say, how'd you like to help us eat 50 pounds of ice cream? It's going to get those teens more excited because they're saying, yeah. In fact, there's a story one time that we were told of a young man in Indiana, and he saw 9 kids rushing out of a van going up to his door. He turned to his mom. He said, Mom, can I go with them? Can I go with them? He didn't even know what they were coming for, but you know what? He was so excited. Whatever they were a part of, he wanted in.
One more thing we want to make sure you do a couple weeks ahead of time is this. Make sure that you order your counseling materials, okay?
That's absolutely right, Aaron. You want to make sure that you have your counseling material so you can go through, maybe have a counselor's training session or look through the material so that your people are familiar with how they're going to do the follow-up after your invitation.
Right. Hey, Kyle, why don't you tell them what happens 1 week before the storm?
Guys, 1 week before the storm, you still want to keep this event fresh on your students' and leaders' minds. So maybe do a couple more announcements, maybe even do another skit. Again, the more excited that your students are about this event, the better it's going to come off. Also, you want to make sure that you have all your flyers printed out. You know, your parent flyers that you're going to be handing out that night. Also, make sure you have your storm tracker cards, okay? If you haven't gotten them yet, you need to make sure you get them, okay?
This would also be a good time to double check on your counseling materials. Make sure you've got all that nailed down. Also, check that other stuff, the games, the props, the music, the techie kind of things. Make sure you have all that stuff nailed down.
And lastly, you want to make sure that you have one final planning meeting with all of your counselors, all of your coordinators. Make sure everybody knows what job they play, what role they're going to take on that night to help the event be successful. And lastly, guys, we want to make sure that you're still praying with all of your students. Take out that top 10 prayer list and work through it. Take some extra time maybe in club the week before and pray through that top 10 prayer list.
Yeah, that's a really good idea, Kyle. I really like that because, guys, as you know, prayer is going to be the key to making this thing successful.
Amen.
Hey, Kyle, why don't we tell them about the night of the event?
Sounds good to me.
Listen, the most important part about making this event happen is having the orientation nailed down, okay? Now, we're going to include an orientation how-to right on this DVD that you guys can watch. You can actually play it right for your students right there that night, and it will instruct your students on what to do.
Yeah, that sounds kind of fun.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. Or you might just want to watch it, take in the ideas, and do it yourself. But remember, the orientation is the most critical part to making this thing happen.
The most critical part to making this thing happen?
Did you hear what I said? The most critical part to making this thing happen.
So we just can't skip over that?
Absolutely not.
All right.
All right. Also, there is a how-to manual that you should have gotten, okay, and probably should have read through.
Probably.
Probably
Take it
should
out.
have.
Come on, dust it off. Dust it off.
Get that out, and you want to look up in there the suggested schedule.
That's right. That's not something you guys have to follow. We just wanted to put it in there to give you a general idea of how most average storms storms run. Take it and run with it. Make it your own. Take it, use it to benefit you guys in any way possible. Now, when we get to the next part, the next key part is going to be after the gospel presentation, your follow-up. Your first step is going to be your counseling. You want to make sure that everybody knows where are they sending the students after they make a decision. And then also, who's going to be greeting them when they come into that room? How are those students getting matched up with their counselors?
Yeah, sometimes that can be a little awkward transition. Also, once the counselor and the student get back into the counseling room, you want to make sure that the counselor knows to record the person's name and address very clearly. So you want to have that for later. Also, the first thing we want to do is make sure that they understand what decision the student just made.
That's
okay?
right. You might want to have a counseling session where you teach them kind of what goes on in the counseling room. That's going to be key to helping those students who just made a decision understand the decision that they just made, okay?
Now make sure this. The counseling room is not necessarily the place to start the follow-up process. You really want to do that after you leave the event that night.
That's right. And a great time to set up that first meeting for follow-up is right after the event, on the way home. I mean, think about it. The student's decision is fresh on their mind. They're excited about it. So turn to them and say, hey, how'd you like to take some time with me to learn about the decision you just made? Maybe take them out for ice cream. What student want to have free ice cream?
Hey.
Great time to set up your second meeting is during your first meeting that you have, that first follow-up session. And we encourage you, do those first 2 meetings within the first week after the student has made that decision for Christ.
Guys, for more information, resources, and ideas, you really need to read that how-to manual. It's got everything you could possibly want to know and need to know about the storm events. And we want you to take it, customize it, make it yours, go out there, and have an awesome night.